When they kick you out on your 18th birthday, they don't give you a cake. They give you a black trash bag for your things, and a bus token that feels as thin and useless as a carnival prize. My sister and I were left on the steps of our grandfather's farmhouse, and what we found there saved us. But it wasn't just about the money or the land or even the secret hidden in the dark. It was about discovering the truth of a sacrifice we never knew was made for us. If you've ever felt lost, or like the world had already decided who you were, then this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button and stick with me, because sometimes the deepest holes are the only way out. The door of the Bayside group home clicked shut behind me with a sound I'd been dreaming of for 6 years. It wasn't the triumphant crash of a prison break, but a quiet, administrative snap. Final. A period at the end of a sentence I hadn't written. I stood on the cracked concrete steps, the morning air thick with the smell of city exhaust and damp pavement. I had one duffel bag, mostly full of clothes that never quite fit, and a manila envelope containing my birth certificate, my social security card, and $78 in cash. My official severance package from the state of California. I was 18. I was free. I was terrified. My sister, Mia, was still inside. She was 15, and her 3 years wouldn't be up for a long time. The thought of it was a physical weight, a stone in my gut. I'd promised her I wouldn't just disappear. I'd promised I'd find a way for us. But standing there, with the drone of the freeway a few blocks away, and the sky the color of a dirty pearl, that promise felt like a lie I had told a child. Which, I guess, it was. My caseworker, Mr. Henderson, had given me the send-off. He was a man made of tired sighs and rumpled shirts. He had the perpetually disappointed eyes of someone who'd seen too many kids like me walk out this door and right into a different kind of cage. "You got the address for the lawyer?" he'd asked, not looking up from his paperwork. I nodded. "And the key?" I held it up. A single, old-fashioned brass key, tarnished and smooth from 100,000 turns in a lock I'd never seen. It had arrived in the mail a week ago, forwarded from our grandfather's last known address, along with a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. "Don't expect much, Leo," Henderson had warned, his voice flat. "Old farms, they're usually more debt than dirt. Might be best to just sign it over, take whatever they offer, and get a room somewhere. Don't get your hopes up." It was the unofficial motto of the system. Don't hope. Hope is a liability. I walked down the street, away from the only home I'd known since Grandpa died. I didn't look back. Looking back was a luxury. In my mind, I could see Mia's face pressed against the thick, wired glass of the second-floor common room window. I didn't have to see her to know she was there. We were two halves of the same coin, separated by 3 years and a wall of bureaucracy. The bus ride downtown was a blur of disconnected images, faces on the street, all going somewhere. Storefronts with promises of happiness you could buy. I felt like a ghost, invisible. The lawyer's office was on the 23rd floor of a glass tower that scraped the sky. It was a place of quiet, expensive clicks. The click of heels on marble, the click of a gold-plated pen, the click of a door closing on a world I didn't belong in. The lawyer's name was Miss Albright. She was sharp, all angles and crisp lines, from her severe haircut to the crease in her trousers. She didn't offer condolences for my grandfather's death 6 years ago. It was a file, a case number, ancient history. "Mr. Reyes," she said, her voice as cool as the glass of water on her desk. "As you know, you've reached the age of majority. As such, you are the sole heir to your grandfather, Mateo Reyes's estate." She slid a folder across the vast expanse of polished wood. It felt a mile wide. "The estate consists of a single property, 34 acres, a farmhouse, and several outbuildings in a place called Oak Valley. I'm sure you remember it." I remembered it in flashes, the smell of hay and summer dust, the rough bark of the oak tree in the front yard, Grandpa's hands, calloused and kind, teaching me how to tie a fishing knot. It felt like another life, a story I'd read about someone else. The property, she continued, steepling her fingers, is, to be blunt, in a state of profound disrepair. It has been vacant for 6 years. Furthermore, your grandfather passed with significant debts. She pulled out a separate sheet of paper. It was covered in numbers that made my stomach clench. The primary issue is property tax arrears. 6 years of non-payment plus penalties and interest. The total amount due to the county is $94,521. The number hung in the air, monstrous and absurd. $94,000. I had 78. The county has scheduled a tax auction for the property in 30 days, she said, her tone unchanging. It wasn't a threat. It was a weather report. A fact. There is, however, a standing offer. She slid another document toward me. A development corporation, Westval Holdings, has been trying to acquire the land for some time. They are prepared to purchase the property as is, settle all tax liabilities directly with the county, and offer you a settlement of $25,000. $25,000. It was more money than I had ever imagined holding. It was a new life, a car, a real apartment for me and Mia once she was out. It was the smart move, the Henderson move. Don't get your hopes up. Take the deal. They need an answer by the end of the week, Ms. Albright added. They want to close before the auction. I stared at the brass key in my hand. It felt heavy now, like an anchor. I thought of my grandfather. He had loved that land. He'd poured his entire life into it. Selling it felt like selling his memory. It felt like selling the last piece of us that wasn't owned by the state. What if I don't sell? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ms. Albright gave a small, almost imperceptible sigh. The sigh of a professional dealing with an emotional amateur. If you cannot pay the $94,000 in 30 days, the property will be sold at auction. Westval will likely acquire it there, probably for less than their current offer. After the taxes are paid, you would receive whatever remains, if anything. It's a significant gamble. I looked out her window at the sprawling city below. All those people, all those lives. None of them were mine. The farm, as broken and indebted as it was mine. It was the only thing that was. I need to see it, I said. She raised an eyebrow. See it? The farm. I need to go there. She considered this for a moment. A bus ticket to Oak Valley is about $40. It's a 3-hour ride. There's no taxi service from the bus stop. It's a 5-mile walk to the property. There's no power, no running water. What do you expect to find, Mr. Reyes? Hope, I thought. But I didn't say it. I don't know, I said. But I have to look. She nodded, a flicker of something, pity, respect, in her eyes. The key is for the front door. The property is legally yours to access until the auction. Do what you need to do. She stood up. The meeting was over. I walked out of that glass tower and back into the real world. The $25,000 offer felt like a devil's bargain. A clean break, but a broken promise. The $94,000 debt felt like a wall I could never climb. I had 30 days. I had $38 left after the bus ticket. I had a key. And I had a 5-mile walk ahead of me. The bus groaned its way out of the city, trading skyscrapers for strip malls, then strip malls for suburbs, and finally, suburbs for the wide, open expanse of the California heartland. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching the world transform. The concrete gray melted into the gold of dry hills, dotted with the dark green of live oaks. It was a landscape I knew in my bones, a memory imprinted on me before I even knew what memory was. For the first time in 6 years, I felt a thread connecting me to the boy I used to be. The boy who ran through these fields, whose grandfather was his whole world. The bus was mostly empty, just me and a few farm workers heading home, their faces etched with the same sun and wind that I was heading toward. I clutched the duffel bag on my lap. Inside, besides my clothes, I had a flashlight, a box of protein bars, and 2 gallons of water. A survival kit for a world I wasn't sure I could survive in. The lawyer's words echoed in my head, more debt than dirt. It was probably true. Grandpa was a proud man, but not a rich one. After Grandma died, he'd managed the farm alone. Then he got sick, and the medical bills piled up like autumn leaves. When he passed, the state stepped in, declared us wards, and the farm was left to rot. The system doesn't care about sentiment. It only cares about numbers on a ledger. I closed my eyes and tried to picture Mia, her fiery spirit, her fierce loyalty. She was tougher than I was, in a lot of ways. She fought back. I learned to disappear. "You're the anchor, Leo," she'd told me during my last visit, her voice low so the monitors couldn't hear. "You gotta find us a place to land, a real place." Was a field of weeds and a collapsing house a real place? Or was it just another ruin? The bus pulled over at a dusty crossroads marked by a single, sun-bleached sign that read, Oak Valley. There was no station, just a bench and a trash can. The driver gave me a quizzical look as I stepped off. "You sure this is your stop, kid?" he asked. "Last bus back to the city is at 6. I nodded. "I'm sure." The bus pulled away, leaving me in a cloud of diesel fumes and profound silence. The only sound was the wind rustling through the dry grass. The air smelled different here. Clean. It smelled of earth and heat and distant cattle. It smelled like coming home. The walk was long. The 5 miles felt more like 10 under the relentless afternoon sun. The asphalt was cracked and the road was empty. I walked past fields of grapevines, their leaves shimmering in the heat, and orchards of almond trees standing in perfect, silent rows. With every step, the city felt more and more like a bad dream. This felt real. The dirt under my shoes, the sweat on my brow, the ache in my legs. This was tangible. Finally, I saw it. At the end of a long, overgrown gravel driveway, half hidden by a stand of colossal oak trees, was the farmhouse. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was smaller than I remembered, and sadder. The white paint was peeling, revealing the weathered gray wood beneath. The porch sagged on one side like a tired old man. Windows were boarded up. The roof was a patchwork of missing shingles. It looked abandoned. It looked hopeless. But it was still standing. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my feet. The sound was deafening in the silence. I could feel the house watching me. I half expected my grandfather to walk out onto the porch, wiping his hands on a rag, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. But there was nothing. Just the wind and the creak of a loose shutter. I climbed the 3 steps to the porch, testing each one before putting my full weight on it. The air was thick with the smell of decay and memory, of damp wood and dry rot, and the faint, lingering scent of my grandmother's roses, which had gone wild and thorny along the railing. I reached the front door. The brass key felt slick with sweat in my palm. I slid it into the lock. It resisted at first, stiff from years of disuse. I jiggled it, pushed, and then, with a loud, grating scrape, the tumbler turned. The door swung inward on a groan of rusty hinges, opening into a cavern of dust and shadows. I took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold. I was home. The air inside was heavy and still, thick with the dust of 6 forgotten years. Shafts of sunlight cut through the grime on the few unboarded windows, illuminating swirling motes of dust like tiny, captured stars. The furniture was still there, shrouded in white sheets like a family of ghosts. I could see the outlines of the familiar sofa where I used to fall asleep watching old movies, the big armchair where Grandpa would read the paper, the dining table where we'd eaten 1,000 meals. It was a time capsule of a life that had ended abruptly. I walked through the downstairs rooms, my footsteps echoing in the silence. My fingers traced lines in the thick dust on the mantelpiece, revealing the dark wood beneath. I ran my hand along the back of Grandpa's chair. The fabric was cold. In the kitchen, a calendar was still pinned to the wall, frozen on May 2018. The month he died. The month our world fell apart. A coffee cup sat on the counter, a brown ring dried at the bottom. It was all so mundane, so normal, left exactly as it was the day the paramedics came, as if he was just going to walk back in and finish his coffee. The grief I had buried for 6 years, packed down under the hard soil of survival, began to crack. It was a dull ache, a pressure behind my eyes. I pushed it back down. I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not yet. I went upstairs. My old room was at the end of the hall. The door was ajar. My baseball posters were still on the wall, faded and curling at the edges. A model airplane I'd built with Grandpa hung from the ceiling, coated in a thick layer of dust, its propeller frozen. This room felt even smaller than I remembered. The world had seemed so big from this window, which looked out over the fields. Now, it just looked like a lot of work. Mia's room was next to mine. It was pink. She had hated the color, but had loved the butterfly stickers she'd plastered all over the walls. They were still there, their wings dull with grime. On her nightstand was a framed picture of the 3 of us. Grandpa was in the middle, a wide, proud grin on his face. He had one arm around me, and the other around a much younger Mia, who was missing her 2 front teeth. We were all squinting in the sun. We were happy. I picked it up, wiping the glass clean with my thumb. This was what I was fighting for. This memory. This feeling. The possibility that it could exist again. I tucked the photo into my bag and went back outside. The afternoon was sliding toward evening. The sun was lower, casting long shadows across the yard. I needed to see the rest of the property, the outbuildings, the barn. The barn was a huge, classic red structure, even more weathered than the house. Its great sliding doors were slightly ajar. I squeezed through the gap into the vast, cathedral-like space inside. The air was rich with the smell of old hay, engine oil, and dry earth. It was a smell I associated so deeply with my grandfather that for a second I felt his presence so strongly it made me turn around. Light streamed in through cracks in the walls, striping the dusty floor. Old farm equipment sat rusting in the gloom. A tractor, a harvester, a collection of plows and tools that looked like medieval torture devices. It was a museum of a dead man's labor. I walked the length of the barn, my flashlight beam dancing over cobwebs as thick as cotton candy. In the back, past the empty animal stalls, was Grandpa's workshop. A heavy wooden workbench was littered with tools, jars of screws and nails, and half-finished projects. This was his sanctuary. He'd spent hours out here, fixing things, building things. He always said that if a man could build something with his own 2 hands, he'd never truly be lost. It was on the far wall of the workshop, behind a stack of old tires, that I saw it. A section of the wooden wall that didn't quite match. The planks were a slightly different color, the nails newer. It was subtle. Most people would have missed it, but I had spent countless hours in this barn, watching my grandfather work. I knew every inch of this place. Or I thought I did. My curiosity piqued. I rolled the heavy tires aside. The wall section was about 4 feet high and 3 feet wide. There was no handle, no hinges. I pushed on it. Nothing. I ran my hands along the edges, feeling for a latch. Near the bottom, my fingers brushed against a small, almost invisible notch in the wood. I hooked my fingernails into it and pulled. With a low groan, the entire section of wall swung inward, not like a door, but like a panel tilting back into the darkness. A wave of cool, damp air washed over me, carrying a scent of deep earth and stone. It was a smell I'd never encountered on the farm before. I shone my flashlight into the opening. It wasn't a room. It was a tunnel. The entrance was framed with thick, rough-hewn timbers, and beyond it, a narrow passage sloped down into the blackness. The walls were made of packed earth and rock. It was old. Very old. My heart was pounding. A secret tunnel? On our farm? It felt like something out of a book. I hesitated for only a second. I had come here to find something. An answer. A reason to hope. Maybe this was it. I clicked my flashlight to its brightest setting, took a breath, and lowered myself into the opening. The tunnel was narrow and low. I had to hunch over to keep from hitting my head on the ceiling beams. The ground was damp, packed dirt. The air was cold, a stark contrast to the heat outside. It was utterly silent. My own breathing sounded loud and ragged. I moved slowly, my flashlight beam cutting a small, trembling circle in the oppressive dark. The tunnel went on for about 50 feet, sloping gently downward before opening into a small, man-made chamber. It was no bigger than a walk-in closet, about 10 feet square, with a low, arched ceiling supported by thick wooden beams. The walls were lined with stone, expertly fitted together. It felt like a cellar, but there was no entrance from the house. This was completely separate, completely hidden. In the center of the chamber sat a large, metal footlocker. It was military green, with heavy latched clasps on the front. It wasn't rusted. It had been protected from the damp. My light fell on a piece of paper taped to the lid. A single word was written on it in my grandfather's familiar, blocky handwriting. Leo. A shiver went down my spine. This wasn't some ancient secret. This was for me. My hands were shaking as I knelt down and undid the latches. They were stiff, but they opened with a loud, metallic clank that echoed in the small space. I lifted the heavy lid. The first thing I saw was a thick, yellowed envelope, also with my name on it. Beneath it, my breath caught in my throat. The footlocker was filled with cash. Neat, plastic-wrapped bundles of $100 bills. Dozens of them. It was an impossible amount of money. More than the lawyer's offer. Maybe enough. My hands trembled as I lifted the envelope. It was thick, heavy. I sat down on the cold floor of the hidden chamber, the flashlight beam propped against the wall, and I opened the letter from my dead grandfather. The paper was crisp, the ink a dark, steady blue. His handwriting was as strong and clear as I remembered his voice. "My dear Leo," it began. "If you are reading this, then it means I am gone, and you have come home. It also means you are a man now, and that you were clever enough to find this place. I always knew you were the observant one. I am so proud of you. I am sorry for leaving you and Mia. My heart breaks to think of you alone. Please know that not a day went by that I didn't think of you. I need to explain some things. The world is more complicated than I ever wanted you to know." I had to stop and take a breath. The words on the page felt like a direct conversation, a voice from the grave reaching out across 6 years of silence. Tears I had refused to shed in the lawyer's office, in the empty house, now pricked at my eyes. I wiped them away and kept reading. "After your grandmother passed," he wrote, "I was lost. The farm was too much for one person, and my health was starting to fail. I knew I wouldn't have many years left. My biggest fear was what would happen to you and Mia. I had debts, not from bad choices, son, but from bad luck. Your grandmother's illness cost a fortune. The farm wasn't making enough. If I passed away, everything I had would be eaten up by the banks and the government. They would have taken the farm, and you two would have been left with nothing. I couldn't let that happen. This farm isn't just dirt and wood, Leo. It's our story. It's your grandmother's garden and your father's tire swing. It's the place you belong. He went on to explain the tunnel. It was a relic from the Prohibition era, used by the farm's original owners to store and transport moonshine. He had discovered it by accident years ago and kept it a secret. It became his way out, his way to save us. I started working off the books, the letter continued. Cash jobs for other farmers, repairing equipment, helping with harvests. It was hard work, and I hid every dollar I earned. I didn't put it in the bank, because the bank would have let the creditors take it. I didn't keep it in the house, because I knew they would search it after I was gone. So I hid it here, in the dark, for you. It was a race against time, Leo, to save enough to give you a chance before my body gave out. My flashlight beam trembled, dancing across the bundles of cash in the box. This wasn't dirty money. It was the product of my grandfather's final, desperate years. Every dollar was a moment of pain, a bead of sweat, a choice to work when he should have been resting. He had worked himself to death to fill this box. There should be enough in here to settle the back taxes, he wrote. I kept track. It will be close. They will ask you where you got the money. They will be suspicious. You will have to be strong. You will have to be smart. Tell them it was a private loan from a family friend who wishes to remain anonymous. Tell them a story. You are always good at stories. Don't tell them the truth. This money, to them, is an undeclared asset. They would find a way to take it. This is your inheritance, Leo, not the state's. The weight of his sacrifice settled on me, heavy and immense. He hadn't abandoned us. He had been fighting for us, in secret, until his very last breath. The narrative I had carried for 6 years, that we were left behind, forgotten, shattered. It was replaced by a truth so painful and so beautiful that I couldn't contain it. I finally broke. I sat on the damp floor of that 100-year-old tunnel, and I cried. I cried for the grandfather I had lost, for the years he had suffered alone. I cried for the boy who had felt so utterly abandoned. I cried for Mia, stuck in a system he had tried so hard to save us from. And I cried with a surge of gratitude so powerful it felt like it could split my heart open. After a long time, my sobs subsided into shuddering breaths. The chamber was cold, but the letter in my hand was warm. It was a final gift, a map, a plan. But it was also a choice. He had left the choice to me. This money is yours, the last paragraph read. You can use it to save the farm. It will be a hard life, Leo. This place needs more than money. It needs work. It needs love. Or you can take the money and go. You and Mia can start a new life somewhere else, far away from here. No one would blame you. It might be the easier path. I will not tell you what to do. A man has to choose his own way. Just know that whatever you decide, I love you. Take care of your sister. Be good to each other. That is all I have ever wanted. Your loving grandpa, Mateo. I read the last lines over and over again. A man has to choose his own way. I looked at the cash. It was $100,000, maybe more. It was freedom. It was an escape. We could disappear. I could get Mia and we could go to Oregon or Colorado, anywhere. We could get a nice apartment, finish school, live a normal life. We wouldn't have to fix a collapsing roof or fight with a development company or spend years trying to bring dead soil back to life. It was the easy way out, the sensible choice. It was the $25,000 offer from the lawyer, but magnified. It was a clean slate. I thought about Mr. Henderson. Don't get your hopes up. I thought about Ms. Albright. It's a significant gamble. They would all tell me to take the money and run. And for a second, I wanted to. The thought of the work ahead, the fight, was exhausting. I was just a kid. I was tired of fighting. But then I looked around the small, stone-lined chamber. This space was a testament to my grandfather's love. He hadn't built it, but he had consecrated it with his hope for us. This tunnel, this farm, this land, it wasn't a burden, it was a gift. A broken, difficult, beautiful gift. Selling it, or abandoning it, would be like spitting on his grave. It would be saying that his sacrifice wasn't worth it. Running away with the money would make us rich, but it would make us orphans all over again. Saving the farm, rebuilding it, that would make us a family again. It would make us home. I sat there in the dark for a long time, the cold seeping into my bones, the weight of the decision settling in my soul. You know, it's funny how a single moment can change everything. One minute you're lost, and the next you have a map, but the map leads to two different worlds. And you're the only one who can decide which one to travel to. If you've ever been at a crossroads like that, a moment where the easy path looks so tempting, but your heart is pulling you down the harder one, let me know in the comments. I read every single one, because these are the stories that connect us. This community we're building here is for people who understand that the hardest choices are often the ones that define us. Now, let's get back to what happened next. I knew what I had to do. The choice was clear. It wasn't even a choice, really. It was a calling. I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I took out one bundle of cash, just enough for emergencies, and tucked it deep into my duffel bag. Then I closed the heavy lid of the footlocker, the sound echoing with finality. I pushed the panel back into place, the hidden door disappearing into the wall of the workshop. The secret was safe again. As I walked out of the barn and into the twilight, the farm looked different. It wasn't a ruin anymore. It was a project. It was a promise. The sagging porch wasn't a sign of decay. It was a job to be done. The peeling paint was a canvas waiting for a fresh coat. The overgrown fields were dormant potential. For the first time, I didn't see what was broken. I saw what it could become. The next morning, I walked the 5 miles back to the bus stop. The journey felt different this time. My steps were lighter. I wasn't running from something. I was walking toward something. I got back to the city, and the first call I made was to Ms. Albright. "Mr. Reyes," she said, her voice as crisp as ever. "Have you made a decision regarding the offer from Westval Holdings?" "Yes," I said, my own voice steady, surprising myself. "I'm rejecting their offer." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her raising an eyebrow. "I see. And the tax liability?" "I'll be paying it," I said, "in full." Another, longer pause. "Mr. Reyes, are you aware of the amount?" $94,000. "I am," I said. "I've secured a private loan from a family friend." I repeated the story my grandfather had given me. It felt flimsy and thin, but I said it with a conviction I didn't know I had. "They wish to remain anonymous, but the funds will be available before the deadline." "I see," she said, the professional veneer cracking for just a moment. There was a hint of surprise, maybe even admiration, in her voice. "Very well. I will need to arrange a cashier's check to be delivered to the county tax assessor's office. You will have to be present to sign the paperwork." "Just tell me when and where," I said. The second call I made was the hardest. It was to the group home. I asked to speak to Mia. Hearing her voice was like a splash of cold water. "Leo? Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm okay, Mia. I'm fine," I said, my throat tight. "Listen, I went to Grandpa's farm." "Is it still there?" she asked, her voice small. It's still here, I said. It's ours, Mia. But it's in trouble. We owe a lot of money on it. I explained the situation, the tax debt, the auction. I didn't tell her about the tunnel or the cash. It was too much, too complicated for a phone call that was probably being monitored. So we're going to lose it? She asked, her voice trembling. That was the fear, the one we'd both lived with, losing things. No, I said firmly. No, we're not going to lose it. I found a way. I'm going to save it. For us. How? It doesn't matter how. I just need you to trust me. It's going to be our home again. I promise. There was silence on the line, and I could hear her trying to process it, trying to decide if she could afford to believe me. Okay, Leo, she finally said, and the trust in her voice was a sacred thing. I trust you. A week later, I was standing in a sterile government office, a place that smelled of old paper and weak coffee. Ms. Albright was beside me, looking slightly baffled as I slid a cashier's check for $94,521 across the counter to a bored-looking clerk. The clerk's eyes widened slightly as she saw the amount. She inspected the check, stamped a pile of papers with a loud, satisfying thud, and slid a receipt toward me. The account for parcel number 734-B is now paid in full, she said, her voice monotone. The lien is released. The property is clear. I took the receipt. It was just a flimsy piece of paper, but it felt like the heaviest, most important document in the world. It was our deed. It was our freedom. It was my grandfather's last will and testament, fulfilled. Outside the building, Ms. Albright looked at me. You did it, she said, as if she still couldn't quite believe it. I hope your family friend knows what a risk they took on you. He did, I said quietly. What now? She asked. The hard part, I replied. I used the last of the cash from the Foot Locker, about $5,000, to buy a beat-up but reliable pickup truck, a generator, a set of basic tools, and enough supplies to last me a month. The rest of the money I left hidden in the tunnel. It was our safety net, our future. It was not to be touched unless it was a life or death emergency. My grandfather had earned that money through work, and I was going to honor him by doing the same. I drove back to the farm, not as a visitor, but as its owner, its caretaker. The work was overwhelming. The first week, I just cleared things out. I hauled away trash. I pulled down rotten drywall. I scrubbed away 6 years of grime. I got the generator running, which gave me power for lights and my tools. I patched the worst of the leaks in the roof with tar and plywood, a temporary fix until I could afford a real roofer. Every muscle in my body ached. I got blisters on my hands that turned into calluses. I was exhausted every night, falling asleep on a cot in the living room, too tired to even dream. But it was a good kind of tired. It was the ache of building something, not the ache of being broken. I learned that I wasn't alone. One day, an old man in a dusty truck pulled up the driveway. He introduced himself as Mr. Jacobson. He'd been our neighbor for 40 years. Heard someone was working over here, he said, his eyes kind. Thought it was that development company. No, sir, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. It's me, Leo Reyes, Mateo's grandson. His face broke into a warm smile. I'll be damned, Mateo's boy. I remember you when you were knee-high to a grasshopper. Your grandfather was a good man, a stubborn man, but a good one. He looked around at the work I'd done, nodding slowly. He'd be proud of you, son. That afternoon, he came back with his own tractor and helped me clear a field that was choked with weeds. He didn't ask for anything in return. He just said, "That's what neighbors do." He taught me how to fix the old irrigation pump. He told me which crops would grow best in the soil. He connected me with other farmers, people who had known and respected my grandfather. They offered advice, loaned me equipment, bought me a beer at the local diner. They saw Mateo in me, and they decided to invest in that legacy. They were the community I had never had. They were the family friend my grandfather had been counting on. I wasn't just a kid from the system anymore. I was Mateo's grandson. I belonged. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. The farm slowly, painfully began to breathe again. I repaired the sagging porch. I painted the house, a fresh coat of white that gleamed in the sun. I planted a small kitchen garden, using the seeds my grandmother had saved in little labeled jars in the pantry. And in the evenings, I would sit on the porch and write letters to Mia, telling her about every small victory. The first tomato that ripened, the day the water started running in the house again, the sound of crickets at night instead of sirens. I was building our home, one nail, one seed, one day at a time. And then, a year after I first stepped back on this land, the best day came. The day a familiar state-issued sedan drove up my driveway. The day Mia, no longer a ward of the state, finally came home. 1 year. It felt like a lifetime. The farm was no longer a wreck. It was a work in progress, but it was alive. The fields I had cleared were now planted with rows of organic vegetables. The house was clean and bright. The porch was solid under our feet. Mia stepped out of the car, looking older, warier, but with the same fire in her eyes. She looked at the house, at the fields, at me. She was speechless. I just opened my arms, and she ran into them. We held on to each other for a long time, right there in the yard, under the shade of the big oak tree. All the years of separation, of fear, of whispered promises in visiting rooms, they all melted away in that one embrace. "You did it, Leo," she whispered into my shoulder. "You really did it." "No," I said, pulling back to look at her. "We did it." Life on the farm was our new reality. It wasn't easy. We worked from sunrise to sunset. Mia, who had never so much as touched a garden tool, turned out to have a natural green thumb. She took over the vegetable plots, tending to them with a fierce, protective love. She talked to the plants, a habit she'd picked up from our grandmother, and damn if they didn't seem to listen. We started selling our produce at the local farmers market. Our stall was small at first, just a single folding table, but people liked our story. They liked that we were organic. They liked that we were Mateo Reyes's grandkids, bringing his farm back to life. Soon, our little table became a popular stop. We made enough to live on, to reinvest in the farm, to slowly, piece by piece, make it whole again. We hired a professional to fix the roof properly. We bought a new water heater. We even got internet. But the tunnel remained our secret. It was a sacred place. One evening, I finally took Mia out to the barn and showed it to her. I let her read our grandfather's letter. She cried, just as I had. She touched the cold metal of the footlocker and understood the depth of his love, the true cost of our second chance. The money inside remained our silent partner, the foundation we knew was there if the world ever tried to knock us down again. We decided the tunnel itself deserved a new life too. It had been a place of secrets and hidden things for too long. We wanted to bring it into the light. We spent a winter cleaning it, reinforcing the walls, running electricity, and installing ventilation. We turned the small, stone-lined chamber at the end into a wine cellar. Mr. Jacobson, whose family had been making wine for generations, gave us our first barrels and taught us the craft. The tunnel that had saved us by hiding money was now going to save us by making it. We started hosting small, exclusive farm-to-table dinners. We'd serve food we grew ourselves, paired with wine we aged in our Prohibition-era cellar. It became our signature, the thing that made our farm unique. People loved it. They loved the history, the story, the sense of discovery as they walked down the narrow passage into the candlelit chamber. The tunnel became a symbol of our entire journey. It was about taking something old and broken, something hidden in the dark, and transforming it into something that brought people together. Something that created light. Looking back now, standing on the porch of my own home with my sister beside me, I understand what my grandfather meant. Home isn't just a place you inherit, it's a place you build. It's a choice you make every single day. The choice to fight for it, to care for it, to fill it with love and hard work. He didn't just leave us money, he left us a purpose. He left us a chance to reclaim our own story. He knew the money could be an escape, but the farm, the work, that was salvation. It's what healed us. It's what gave us back our name. It gave us a place to belong. The world will always try to tell you who you are. It'll give you a label, a ward of the state, an orphan, a statistic. It'll hand you a trash bag for your belongings and tell you not to get your hopes up. But the truth is, you get to decide who you are. You get to choose the harder path. You get to build your own home, even if you have to start with a ruin. Our stories are not written for us. We write them ourselves, with every choice, every act of defiance, every refusal to give up. This channel is a place for those stories. It's for everyone who has ever had to fight for their place in the world. So if this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to rebuild from nothing, I want you to do two things. First, hit that subscribe button and join this community. We're in this together. Second, leave a comment below and share a piece of your own story. Tell me about a time you chose the harder path. Tell me what home means to you. I promise you, I will read it, because your story matters. You are not alone. And the hardest parts of your journey might just be the foundation of your greatest strength. Thank you for listening.